there's a green sheet going around, so make sure you sign it before we begin. So this is our first seminar event we're doing as part of Amnesty. If you don't, hey, how you doing? Come in. If you don't know too much about us, I'll do a quick presentation on our club. I'm sorry for people who were there last time, it's kind of a repeat. So we are an international activist club at UNIMELB. Our goal with our club is to kind of give space for students to discuss political issues with a lot of freedom, and to discuss some of the pressing issues we have as students as well. And we have an initiative here that mainly focuses on human rights as a perspective, and we go from there. So we try to be as open as possible with our views here. So we have three main types of events that we're going to hold. So usually we would have bi-weekly film screenings. So we have film screenings from all across the world: Cambodia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Germany, and we do these international film screenings about human rights to kind of show the connection between human rights in Australia and human rights around the world. Later on, we will also have analytical events, stuff like this, where we have seminars led by people who are experts on the topic, like Angela here will do today on the DRC. And we'll also host academics and experts to try to get people to think more deeply about these issues. And finally, we'll have our active events, mainly comprising of things like letter writing, banner making, but also more creative advocacy. So I'll give you guys a little inside information here, but we're going to have a humanitarian art competition going on very soon, where you can post things like poetry, music, film, paintings, and we'll give a prompt linked to human rights, and there'll be a big showcase, a public exhibition we'll do as well at uni. So stay tuned for that. So here are some of the film screenings we plan to do. The first one we did last week, The Look of Silence, on the Indonesian mass killings. Next week we're going to do one on Cambodia about the Khmer Rouge. And we have a bunch of films from different countries, all with different human rights issues. And I think you'll enjoy all of them because they all have deep, specific country-based issues that link directly to the issues of now. And all this info will be on our Instagram as well if you want to look back later. But I think you'll genuinely enjoy our selection of our films. So now we have our seminars. We're going to have 3 seminars for the sem. Obviously, today we have Angela's seminar on the DRC. Next, we'll have one on the climate crisis, led by Richie, who is our education officer. And finally, I'll have one on Gaza near the end of the semester. So we'll have seminars all through the sem, and hopefully you guys can come to each one and try to discuss these issues more deeply. Finally, we have a more broader list of topics that the experts will hold. And in our Instagram, we have all the information, so please follow us there if you don't already. Okay, that's about it. You can go back to your one. So now I'll have Angela speak for a seminar, and take it away. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Oh, that's no problem. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. So my name's Angela. You might have seen, if you're wondering why someone from Pure Maths is here to talk about geopolitical affairs, it's kind of because I think once upon a time, a bunch of people from maths went into finance and destroyed the world in the name of optimization. Oh, you don't like?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is largely an apology on behalf of everyone who studies math. Yeah. Today, the name of today's seminar is Manufacturing Apathy. And we're kind of going to start by looking at a brief overview of sort of the history and geopolitical affairs of the Congo region. And once we have a bit of that, like post-colonial history and geographical context down, we'll kind of go into a broader discussion about how, devices that some of you may have heard that, the resources that come out of the Congos are quite prevalent in technology that we use. So we'll touch on that a little bit, and this is mostly to be a hopeful seminar, so I will talk a bit about things we can do to kind of minimize our impact and maybe have a positive one overall. And please interrupt if you have questions or if I'm going too fast at all. So for a brief post-colonial history of the Congos, around 1885, when a lot of the big European international nations were dividing up Africa, at the time it was called the Kingdom of Congo with a K, but that was granted to the Belgian King Leopold as private property. This started a infamously brutal reign during what was known as the Congo Free State. King Leopold II was very well known for like horrific torture, not looking after the Congolese people at all. There was also like amputations of like limbs if people weren't working hard enough. So very, very brutal stuff, to the point where
Why did they call it the Congo Free State?
You see, oxymoron, isn't it? You'd think so, but it was private property while it was called Congo Free State. After 1908, there was a lot of pressure from international communities and like people outside, particularly the UK as well, to at least make it a Belgian colony. But yeah, it is oxymoron of a name, I agree. But again, a lot of pressure from the international community. Some of the, that phrase, like crimes against humanity, some of the most early uses of the phrase was referring to the Congo Free State under King Leopold II. But around 1908, the region was known as Belgian Congo and was officially a colony of Belgium. And around about that time, there were protests against that very authoritarian colonial regime. And primarily, something that will be contextually important later, there was not a lot of effort to provide much in the line of education for the Congolese people. There was a focus on primary education. Secondary education was obviously a lot harder to get into. By the time the time that we're looking at in terms of gaining independence around the 1960s, the figure that's mostly accepted is about 16 people had university degree equivalent within the entire Congo state, which is, mind you, the second largest country in Africa. So anyway, so past independence around 1965, the Democratic Republic of Congo is actually renamed Zaire in what begins as the Mobutu era. This is a very autocratic regime that kind of lasts about 30 years with a lot of United States support. It's seen as a means of kind of stopping Soviet intervention in the region. Guys probably know you could do a lot back then in the name of stopping communism. Mobutu was supported by the US to stop the spread of communism in Africa, and a lot of sort of Western sources will refer to that as sort of a time of stability within the region. However, it was devastating on the human rights front. It was very we're going to get into some of what had been going on there, but it was filled with corruption and was quite a long dictatorship. Any questions before I proceed? So, for a bit of geographical context, the region of Congo is actually sometimes referred to as one of the richest countries in the world, just purely based on the untapped resources in the area, amounting to close to 24 trillion. Obviously, I think in geopolitical context, this is called a resource curse more than a resource blessing, but Congo supplies us with about 57, that number has gotten up to sort of 70% of global supply and reserves in recent times, of cobalt and coltan. Cobalt and coltan is more specifically what we hear when we say that, again with the title of the seminar as well, rechargeable batteries very much need cobalt and coltan, so it's in a lot of electronics. Particularly the switch towards EVs lately has also kind of bolstered a lot of need over there. Lithium and manganese, which actually isn't up here, but it's also a very large supplier of that as well. is particularly important for our transition towards green energy. So when we're talking about things like, and we have a climate change seminar coming up in a couple of weeks as well, but when we're talking about some of these green transitions, we do need to also think about, I guess, where those resources are coming from and sort of where we're, like, what kind of means we're using to get them. And we also have a quote from the former Minister of Mines, where we basically highlight that not a lot of these resources, not like the benefit from the resources doesn't really go back to the Congolese people here very often at all. And we're going to get into sort of the history of exploitation there as well. But yeah, any questions? Good. Okay. So, in terms of ongoing conflicts in the region, we are still in very much a period of political turmoil. Currently, the main, I guess, actors on that front are M23, which is a rebel group named after March 23 that primarily has Rwandan support. There's also the ADF, which is a primarily Ugandan military group, and then you have, I can't actually, the Kodako is like Congolese, some of them have very long acronyms. I'm going to skip over that one. But that is another a liberation front that's currently clashing with government forces. And we have seen just a lot of indiscriminate killings and a lot of instability, particularly towards Eastern Congo, where a lot of these forces are clashing. Following that, we have, of course, the state of siege that was announced in the Congos, which has, for the most part, been used as a means of silencing political dissent. One person in particular Amnesty follows is Jackie Nadala, a member of the opposition party Together for the Republic. Nadala was initially wrongly held in inhumane conditions in a Congolese prison. He spoke up about being raped in that prison, and that having been ordered by a sitting member of parliament. Afterwards, after speaking about his experience, he was again arrested and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for spreading rumors. So, yeah, there's, without sugarcoating it too much, it is like quite heavy in terms of the conditions in the prisons as well. So the prisons that are built for about 1,500 people are holding 15,000, so 10 times over capacity, right? You might see that in September, a deadly incident resulted in at least 129 prisoner deaths and over 250 women raped. Roughly 100 of those deaths were purely suffocation, in that, like, purely people suffocating to death because of how crammed they are in those prisons. And obviously this is a broader theme of, silencing dissent and realistically corruption in the government, but we also have to think about that as a product of Western involvement and just a country that had not been helped after being very heavily disadvantaged. The next topic is about rape as a weapon of war. This one's also a bit heavy, so if you do need to leave the room, please feel free. There are alarming levels of sexual and gender-based violence in the Congos at the moment. In 2023 alone, there was 133,000 cases of sexual violence, and conflict-related cases doubled in the first quarter of 2024 compared to the same period in 2023. So again, this is something that we're seeing getting worse rather than better. Rape in the context that we're seeing in the Congos is very much being used as a means of breaking the spirit of some of the people in, I guess, the more vulnerable areas, and it does particularly impact those that are in camps because of all of the displacement that's going on. And yeah, the violence is tied to conflict dynamics, with surges linked to the fighting.
So the internal conflicts in the DRC, what are the reasons that they're fighting?
Sure. So when it comes to, you have a couple main players. The M23 has quite a bit of Rwandan support, and by extension, Western support as well. And then you have
what is their stated goal?
It is mostly political infighting. So it is, you have this situation where there isn't much of a democratic stage for disagreement, and so as a result, that bubbles up in terms of this is also partly part of this political infighting is also the Rwandan genocide, which we haven't gone into much here, but this has caused religious conflicts within the region, and also geopolitical ones based on just resources. The Congo especially, because we're dealing with geographical distribution of resources, you get very, very rich areas right next to very, very poor areas. And to answer the question fully, it's the result of that there is no real democratic process for these political disagreements. There's a lot of religious conflict internal that has not been addressed, and more than anything, it is there is just not much experience and infrastructure within the government, and so at the moment what we're looking at is this sense of grasp for the fight for power, the grasp for power at the moment. And does that sort of answer your question? I guess I was wondering
how much is it motivated by one group wants more autonomy, or it's because of some older ethnic tension or religious thing, or is it for resources?
So, a combination of a lot of factors. When you had the Rwandan genocide, you had a lot of the Tutsi population. And were you familiar with the religious conflict there? So, you do have a religious aspect to it as well. However, I would be hesitant to say it's any one of those things, because you also look at who's supporting these groups, what is their intention, what's their motives, so on and so forth. And Amnesty International, the biggest position is any sort of fight for on the Liberation Front or anything just needs to take human rights into account. And we can't keep seeing just the total displacement and the killing of civilians regardless of what side it is. But yeah, so when we're looking at rape as a weapon of war, though, particularly, a lot of these cases, especially when it's the clusters of these cases are happening around sort of the poorer settlements with access to the mines, which we'll get into. And it is sort of very clear from, especially from a lot of sources, that this is purely to make sure that people don't feel too comfortable getting out of the situation that they're in. And a lot of children are disproportionately affected by this. 40% of the survivors are young girls. And yeah, it's, I'll move on from that, but if you have any questions, we can go back. The last thing I want to talk about before we go into more current affairs is displacement. Approximately 7.3 million people are internally displaced in the DRC, and 80% of them are fleeing clashes between armed groups, particularly M25 and the AU. So, and more than half of the displaced population are women. And one thing, again, making the displacement worse is obviously when new mining zones are to be created, people are being forcibly evicted out of their homes, which is leading to more human rights abuses and displacements, particularly in the camps that these people have to run to. And obviously, 7.3 million people displaced, we can understand that that leads to quite a dramatic impact on the country's ability to develop their infrastructure and education and quality of life for these people. So yes, okay. Now to, I guess, something more central to today. So you guys might have seen this get a little popular. A couple of years back, sort of around, I think 2020 to 2023, we had a lot more conversation going on about conflict minerals in our phones and in our devices. And there was actually a lawsuit brought to a US case by some of the former miners in some of those Congo's mines about their part in the conditions over there. So those were companies like Apple, Google, Dell, Microsoft, Tesla. There was also like a lot of other, obviously, companies because 70% of the world's cobalt comes from there. And you're probably going to notice that like some of these names are obviously devices that we have. It's pretty unavoidable here. So the Apple CEO guy, Tim Cook, his response to this was mostly very much washing his hands off of it. So he had a public response about how they looked at every step in their supply chain process and ensured that it was free of child labor and anything like that. This is like mostly a little bit bullshit, to be honest, because you can't. There are too many holes in that supply chain process to be 100% sure that all of your cobalt or coltan, for example, is ethically sourced. But even sort of beyond that, I just wanted to kind of make a point about how the response was to just wash your hands off the conflict entirely and be like, it comes from companies that don't engage in child labor or in unethical practices, and completely ignore the geographical conditions and systematic challenges that lead to the very problems that they were being sued over. So for the next slide, I'm gonna leave this here. Have a read of these quotes and let me know when you guys are done. Question?
Like, why did, with the case?
Yeah.
So why did the United States courts have to gain and absolve, over this, paid out? Or was it
Oh, so is the question why were they absolved of?
Yeah.
I mean, so the official reason given was that there was no responsibility on these companies to do more than they were already doing because it was just a normal buyer-seller relationship and it infringes on free trade. Unfortunately, it's kind of a recurring pattern with these things where if it's between the more ethical humanitarian option and maintaining a status quo of free trade, American courts tend to lean towards the other, which again is what you keep seeing with Congos. It is there's an air of it's too disruptive to take the sort of humanitarian, the human way out of this. Anyway, so we've all read through this. So yeah, some of these quotes is the biggest reason why I wanted to do a seminar, because I know that I've also spoken to a lot of people that they kind of heard stuff was going on in the DRC, but they didn't know exactly what it was. So again, this becomes a little bit of a political debate when we're talking about the use of child labor in the Congos. It's not every mining company over there. It is officially at least named the illegal mining companies will, or illegal mining ventures will employ child labor, but it's more so thinking about this from like a systematic perspective. If you have extreme poverty in a region and one of the only ways to make a good living is mining, and let's say you're a single parent with a kid and there's no daycare, you don't have much option but to bring your kid to work, right? And it's very much a case of there's not much else these families can do in that situation to avoid what these kids are going through. And I guess the question becomes, how can we stop that? Which is, so the Pansy Foundation up the top is they're centered around supporting Congo women. They have a hospital for victims of sexual assault and rape, and they, through donations, are able to provide life-saving care for these people. And then we also have Save the Children, and their work in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They have a nice holistic approach to what they're doing. So they want to obviously stop children from working in the mines and get an education instead, but they understand that it's not enough to just pay for the tuition fees. You also have to help the family, make sure the family's stable, make sure the family has a stable enough place to live, and the family's looked after so that the family can look after the children as well. So both of these, I'll send this out in a link to you guys if you're interested. But these are two ways where we can just have a little bit of, I guess, reverence with the fact that yes, it is unavoidable that we are going to be using cobalt, coltan, conflict materials like command of the DRC. But I guess rather than washing our hands of it,
make a small change to the society. I always believe that from my side, I'm doing research and I'm writing journal articles from this side. So I do my best from my side. That's it.
That's a good answer. How about you, Natalie?
So the balance between the government and the people, I would say that the government can be forced to do what the people want. if you're, you know, if you're like, if you have agreed to do one thing, the government can be moved. For instance, you know, there is that movement where we say the government is supposed maybe to support people with disabilities. And if, for instance, you do some demonstrations, if you, not just demonstrations, but then if you go maybe for a dialogue with the government, they will understand your needs and they can, you know, make sure that whatever you want should be given, and maybe like a trade-off or something, you know.
Very helpful answers. I think
I have a more depressing, like,
let's have another change.
Yeah, I don't know. I always thought it was like, you know, the whole idea of government in general is like us delegating the responsibility to make day-to-day decisions to other people, essentially, on the idea that like, oh, we trust you, we'll make good decisions. But like, for example, I think in Australia especially, we have a representation problem. Like, I think like a lot of like over time, especially with the population growth in Australia, like the amount of people represented by one parliament member, for example, is like crazy. Like it's gotten to what 800,000 people for one minister. So it's like one member of parliament. So it's become, I feel like, disproportionate representation essentially. And I feel like what happens is when government's given too much like power because they represent such a large group of people now, is that like it's easy for issues that are not like high on the local level priority list to get ignored. So like if a local population has the issue of cost of living, it's easy for the Minister of Parliament to focus on that because it's like the local need will come first before anything else. But then he doesn't address that social need that we all have that duty of care. So I do think it's like a more representation structural problem in Australian government on like the priorities that are taken to Parliament. But I think, like personally, the way we would resolve it is taking away power from companies and like establishing a duty of care on them. Like if companies had a duty of care, which they don't, like they have a duty of care on like the people who use their like facilities or use their product and services, but they don't have a duty of care on like, you know, the production of their product, or like, you know, the duty of care to make sure like there's key checkpoints to make sure like the product isn't using exploitation of like lesser countries and stuff. But yeah, that is what I would say.
Good. I think very good points.